ready.
I call this February 3rd Planning Commission meeting to order. Welcome to the meeting, gentlemen. We have one item on the agenda tonight. I had to do a double take when I saw when it's due to council. It said February 21st, and it's already the month of February, believe it or not. The year is moving fast. But before we consider that item, we need to consider the minutes from the last meeting, January 6th. What's the desire of the board?
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion to approve the Planning Commission meeting minutes from February 3rd, 2022.
I would like to say that there needs to be a correction in the minutes in that Todd and I didn't vote to approve the minutes because we
abstained
So
we abstained.
because we weren't there.
to abstain, that would be the correction is 4-2, sorry. Is there a second?
Second.
A motion has been made and properly seconded. All in favor, please raise your right hand. The motion carries. The item we have to consider tonight is CU-21-16/V-21-34 Custom Pools Atlanta /711 Highway 9. Who is presenting? Michael?
Thank you, Chairman and Commissioners. The item before you tonight is a conditional use and variance. Custom Pools of Atlanta is requesting a conditional use and variance to operate a contractor's office with outside storage and a 3,000 square foot building on about 2/3 of an acre. Have the location map on the overhead. This property is located at 711 North Main Street. It's at the southwest corner of North Main Street and Henderson Parkway. Property is, got an aerial of that property. This is undeveloped property. It's zoned neighborhood commercial, which allows contractor's office with outside storage with approval of a conditional use. Surrounding properties are zoned C1 except for the property to the west and southwest is City of Milton. Applicant is asking for 2 variances. There's a variance to the undisturbed 50-foot undisturbed buffer to reduce that to a minimum 15 feet. And then also to allow for easements within the 20-foot landscape strip along North Main Street. As I mentioned, the adjacent property to the west is in City of Milton. It has mixed-use zoning, so there's a possibility that that could be developed for residential use. And so commercial properties adjacent to a residentially zoned or used property would require a 50-foot undisturbed buffer. The home builder of this subdivision in Milton actually pad graded that site and they sold it. At the time that they sold it, you can see that they did plant a buffer adjacent to the residential units to the south. So they did that with the intent that that would develop as a commercial property, but we have to plan for a potential use as residential. And then you can see that on the properties to the south here, that developer also provided it's about a 15-foot buffer on their property that is shown. This is the applicant's site plan. So the applicant is asking for a 15-foot buffer along this property line. They're not required to provide a 15-foot buffer on the south property line. This is Primrose School, which is a daycare center that is in the city of Alpharetta. It's commercial use, but they are providing a 15-foot buffer along that south property line. And it actually widens out a little bit more here, which is the closest point to the residential, so it widens out more than 15 feet. Their detention pond is in this particular area. The other variance that they're asking for is for the 20-foot landscape strip along North Main Street. GDOT has easements within this area, and so they're not showing any plantings in that 20-foot landscape strip right now. So they're asking for a variance to allow that landscape strip to be encumbered by easements. They'll need to, we have a condition that deals with that, and what we would do is we would ask the applicant to work with GDOT to get some of the plantings in there. There is additional area behind the 20-foot where the easement occurs, where they could also plant. So even though we're ultimately supporting the variance request on the landscape strip, we would support it as long as they're still putting in the required landscape material just beyond where the landscape strip is located. Custom Pools of Atlanta has been in business for about 20 years. They provide swimming pool contractor services. They describe in their application the property will be used as a contractor's office with customers by appointment only. Their outdoor storage is for the overnight storage of work trucks and trailers with small machinery, and they did provide some photographic examples of that. This is labeled Exhibit A because it's referenced in a condition that you'll see later. This is their typical work truck, and then you see the trailer, some smaller machinery. The hours of operation are Monday through Saturday, 6:30 a.m. to 7 p.m. Applicant anticipates starting out with about 5 employees and growing up to 10 employees in the future. Just going back to the site plan on the overhead, the site plan shows a 1-story over basement 3,000 square foot building along North Main Street. There's parking, of course, to the side and to the rear of the building. Access to the site is from Henderson Parkway, so they would remove the existing curb cut on North Main Street. There are 6 parking spaces in the upper parking lot, as well as 6 in the parking area to the rear of the property. And that does meet our parking requirements. This plan also shows the 15-foot buffer along the west and south property lines. There's also an 8-foot wood privacy fence in conjunction with that buffer. I believe their plans do show the fence on the outer edge of the buffer. We have in our conditions, you'll see here in a few minutes, if approved, we're recommending that that fence be placed inside the buffer so that the plantings help screen that privacy fence. They have tree saves on the property. Let me go back to the site plan. There are 5 tree saves shown in this general corner here. There's 1 pine and then 4 hardwoods. And as I mentioned, the stormwater facility is back here by the buffer that would be screened from the roadway. Staff looked at the trips that would be generated from this site, approximately 5 a.m. peak hour trips and 6 p.m. peak hour trips. Let me show you some of the renderings that the applicant provided. This again is the top view. This is a view from North Main Street. If you look real close at this, they're showing primarily brick with some stone in this location at the front. This is a view on Henderson Parkway looking towards North Point Parkway. So you can see there's some topography on the property. So the parking lot that is beside the building actually sits at a higher grade at the main level of the building, and then that rear lower parking lot sits at the basement level of this. So this is the area where the outside storage would occur. So you can see that this drive aisle actually will help screen that as well, in addition to the landscaping out along at the corner of North Main Street and Henderson Parkway. Let's see what else we have here. And then this is looking from the corner at the proposed development. Staff has reviewed the applicant's proposal for conditional use and variance against the review criteria. We don't believe that the proposal would have significant impacts on the surrounding properties, which are primarily developed as non-residential uses. The property to the west, as I mentioned before, could be developed for residential use, although we believe that it's more likely that it would be developed as commercial given its frontage on North Main Street. If approved, we're recommending conditions conditions that would place limitations on the outside storage area, business activities, and require screening of outdoor storage areas from the public right-of-way. Believe variance hardships relate to the size of the property, the presence of GDOT easements, and adjacent mixed-use zoning. The applicant did provide a citizen participation report. They did indicate that they did receive 2 inquiries from nearby properties. Those are similar to inquiries that the city received. Those dealt with their location of their proposed entrance and requested a similar buffer and solid fence along the south property line, which the applicant did provide, as well as a request that construction vehicles not block the street during pickup and drop-off hours of the preschool to the south. And of course, that would not be permitted. Henderson Parkway is a public street. Since City of Milton is an adjacent jurisdiction, I called my counterpart over at the City of Milton, as well as sent the applicant's application to them. And Milton staff came back and said that they did not have any concerns with the applicant's proposed vegetation and fencing along the Milton city limits. This was shown to the public at the January 12th Community Zoning Information Meeting. There were several public comments and questions at that meeting. Some of the questions and comments that we received were they wanted to know what would be stored outside, whether chemicals would be stored at the property, whether there would be outdoor pool displays, if the company was new or existing. They wanted to know if the trucks would make any noise, like the backing up, the beeping with the backup of the trucks, whether outdoor storage would be visible from the residential properties, the size of the trucks, their hours of operation, and then whether the location was purely office or if it was more of like a sales retail environment. There were some concerns. There was a comment that they felt that this use was more appropriate for an industrial area, and one concern about the loss of tree cover. Applicant did respond by email to all those questions. With that, staff is recommending approval of the applicant's request. And that is subject to 16 conditions. I'll go through those. Condition 1, contractor's office with outside storage shall be added as a conditional use at 711 North Main Street and limited to no more than 3,000 square feet. 2, conditional use approval shall be limited to custom pools of Atlanta. No additional contractor's office with outside storage use or subleasing shall be permitted on the subject property. 3, contractor's office with outside storage shall be limited to office with customers by appointment and outside storage of work trucks and trailers with small machinery. 4, states the hours of operation. 5, site shall be developed and trees shall be saved substantially as depicted on the site plan prepared by Georgia Premier Land Services, revision date 4/1/2021. 6, outside storage shall be limited to the rear parking lot and shall be limited to the storage of work trucks and trailers with small machinery as depicted in Exhibit A. That was the exhibit I showed you earlier. Outdoor storage shall be screened from public streets except where visible from the project driveway as approved by the DRB. 7, per the property owner, work trucks shall not utilize audible reverse alarms on the property. 8, swimming pool chemicals shall not be stored in the building or in the outside storage area. 9, a minimum 15-foot planted buffer shall be provided along the west and south property lines as depicted on the site plan, revision date 4/1/2021. Buffer shall be planted with a mix of evergreen trees and shrubs. Privacy fence shall be placed inside the 15-foot buffer with evergreen landscaping material screening the fence from adjacent properties, final approval by DRB. 10, developer shall work with GDOT in the city to allow the required planting material in the landscape strip along North Main Street. If GDOT will not allow required planting material within the 20-foot landscape, planting material shall be planted at the back of the easement and in front of the building and parking lot with final approval by DRB. 11, building shall be brick and stone as depicted, and scale shall be substantially similar to the submitted renderings. Building architecture shall meet an approved style in the downtown overlay, with final approval of design and materials by the downtown consultant and DRB. And we reference the downtown here, even though this property is just outside of the downtown overlay. This property is part of the Highway 9 LCI, Livable Centers Initiative, and that particular LCI references Alpharetta's downtown with regard to building architecture. Condition 12, if a dumpster is used, enclosure shall consist of materials similar to those used on the building and gate, shall be metal and opaque as approved by DRB. 13, North Main Street driveway shall be removed prior to the issuance of a CO. 14, full stormwater management shall be required. Reasonable efforts shall be made to obtain easements to tie stormwater pond outfall through a pipe directly into a downstream structure rather than releasing at grade. If tie-in is not possible, measures shall be used to prevent concentrated flow at the property line. 15, corner of North Main Street and Henderson Parkway shall be heavily landscaped and include ornamental planting beds with final approval by DRB. And 16, signage shall not be internally illuminated. And that concludes the presentation. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer those.
Thank you, Michael, for the presentation. I have one comment regarding the buffer. It's 50 feet, 15 from 50 feet. Was there any attempt to look at other alternatives of the placement of the building to avoid such a significant variance request?
I think you'd probably need to refer that question to the applicant to see if they were able to do that. I know it is a fairly small site for a commercial property. I also do know that the applicant has owned this property for about 20 years, I believe, and he can verify that. At the time, this property in Milton didn't have the ability to do residential development, so that actually changed since he had the property. So there's that hardship as well. By changing this to a mixed-use zoning on the Milton side, it technically impacted this property with that buffer. But with regard to if they looked at making some changes to the site plan, I would need to defer to the applicant on that.
Okay. And the second question is regarding condition number 14. I see the word reasonable and then efforts. I tend not to use, such an undefinable word. What does that actually mean?
The condition was provided by our stormwater engineer, and basically I think she wanted to give some flexibility to the applicant. Obviously, in order to tie in here, they're going to have to get permission from an off-site property owner. And what I think she's looking for is that the applicant make that effort to tie in, and if they just are unwilling to do it, she'll be able to, it'll give the applicant flexibility to work with our staff to find an alternative.
Okay.
We've had that happen a couple times. I think there was a residential subdivision that was approved out on Douglas Road that had a similar type condition, and there was some difficulty in the tying into the storm drain on the adjacent property. If they can't, that would be the preferred preference of the city. But if they just can't, then she wanted to give some flexibility.
All right. Any further questions for Michael?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. I have a question for Michael. Michael, I just want to get back to that topic that the chairman spoke to initially on item number 9 and the buffer. And this top view picture is a good, illustrates my question. If I'm looking at this right, there's a difference between the planted buffer and the natural tree buffer that already exists. And I've been to the property, and I know on the south side here with Primrose School, the Bhatias, the owners, Mr. and Mrs. Bhatia, requested that the tree buffer be the same on the south side as it is shown here on the west side. And I guess my question is, am I interpreting all that correctly? And if so, are these trees going to reappear on the south side that are not in this picture?
So in this picture, this dark line here represents the applicant's property line. All these trees are off-site. There's no room. This is the Primrose School on this property, and I received the same communication from the Primrose School. There's no opportunity to provide a buffer on the Primrose School's property. Their driveway goes right up to the edge of the property line. And there's not even a buffer required here anyways by our code. The applicant actually provided the buffer unsolicited. Just they brought that forward with their initial application, a 15-foot buffer. City requires nothing there.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then just the other quick question on the privacy fence, and I think I know the answer to this, but the Bhatias specifically requested that that be solid, not slatted or see-through, and I assume that's solid.
It is the applicant did respond to that question, and it is a solid, opaque privacy fence.
Okay. Thank you, Michael.
Any other questions? All right, hearing none, we're going to ask the applicant to come forward and make a presentation.
Oh, right here, okay. Good evening, my name's Danny Frankie. I am the owner of the property. I'm also the owner of Custom Pools of Atlanta. And I guess I come here before you asking for these accommodations so that we can build a home for our business. We're a residential swimming pool builder, and I think this will be a good home for us. Again, I've owned this property for over 20 years. When I bought this property, that neighborhood did not exist. And when City of Milton rezoned that to residential, I was never given any notice. So I had no chance to voice my concern about a 15-foot buffer reduced down to, or from a 50-foot buffer. That was never, an option simply wasn't given to me. So we didn't even know it was rezoned. And so I kind of feel like, us given at least a 15-foot buffer is more than would have been required had we developed the property 20 years ago. So again, we're going to be our home. We're appointment by only. We're a residential swimming pool builder. We don't have large excavation equipment. That's something we subcontract out. You can check our references. I am a fine, upstanding business owner. Our current business is in Sandy Springs, and this is a strong area, and we just want to be here. So this is for Custom Pools of Atlanta, for my son to take over at one point. I've got my partner, Mike Scheck, here, and we want to make something that's nice, make a statement that's going to be in keeping with what the city is looking for, and where we build our pools. If you look at our architecture, that's primarily what we do. Is we build pools in people's backyard that homes look like that. It's a farmhouse style, and I think it's a perfect fit for this, and it'd be a great development for that corner.
Thank you for your presentation. The question I asked Michael regarding the variance request, which is a significant variance, is whether there were any evaluations of alternatives where the building can be moved to accommodate a larger buffer between your building and the potential mixed-use development.
No. In fact, we've pushed it as far as we can, given our parking, given our detention, given all of those criteria, and I think scaled back on our building to the tune of 3,000 square feet. I think anything less, and we wouldn't be able to make this work.
Yeah, anytime we grant or recommend approval of a variance or anything for that matter, we get concerned about precedent. If somebody may make the argument where we keep reducing the requirements for buffers within our development, and that was the reason why I was particularly concerned about the significant difference between 50 and 15. If there was any attempt based, there are some difficulties in placing a building in a challenging topographic area that's understandable and not meeting all the other requirements. And so we want to make sure that there is a case to be made if somebody else makes the same request and points to this particular application and say, well, but you did that. And we are not arbitrary and capricious when we grant or recommend the granting of a waiver.
And I appreciate that, sir, but again, my situation is unique. I've owned this property since before they owned their property. So they didn't own that property when I bought mine. Those houses weren't there. None of those residents owned those properties when I owned my property. And when I bought my property, I didn't have those conditions on me. So when they moved in, those conditions automatically got placed on us. We didn't have a say-so in that. And I think had we been warned, then we would have we could have objected to their development, and we could have placed the restriction that we don't have a 50-foot buffer requirement. I would think that they would concede to that because they wouldn't have otherwise gotten the development.
And that's the case we want you to make, so it's on record, and we are,
Yes, sir.
we are able, and I know staff has looked at this, so when they make a recommendation like this, we know they've done their due diligence. That's why we ask these questions, because we set a precedent where somebody can make the same case. Hey, you give them a 15, why? Not me.
Right.
Exposes the city, so we have to make sure we can justify it. Any other questions for the applicant?
I have a couple. So as far as your fleet that you're going to be parking there, like at the end of the day, how many vehicles do you think will be there at the end of the day?
On any given day, one, maybe two. Mike and I drive a truck, and that's part of our fleet, if you will. We take those home. They're pickup styles. So these aren't, again, we don't have big commercial vehicles. It's primarily, and we move from job to job. So, our trailer that pulls our small, it's not really excavation equipment. This is small earth-moving equipment that otherwise would be done with hand and shovel. So we have a lot of small machinery. We move that to job, but there's times where, hey, we're in the middle now, and where do we park our equipment? We like to park our equipment there. So it's on trailers, and these are small. We don't have a trailer that's larger than 18 feet long. So all of that sits on those smaller trailers. And so it would be something like that, where maybe there's a couple pieces of machinery, maybe there's 4 pieces of machinery. But as far as our trucks, we own 4 trucks, and that's all we have in our fleet right now. That could grow to 6, but that we would never. We're not a service company. We don't want to be a service company, so we wouldn't have a fleet of 10 trucks that would be running around servicing these pools. We're a new swimming pool builder, so we contract with homeowners to build new swimming pools. And primarily, we engage subcontractors. We've got some of our own crew that do some of the landscaping and things like that, clean up and that, and that's what those trucks are for. And so that's what we need it for. For example, we close down every holiday for Christmas. We close for 2 weeks. We probably need a place to park our stuff and call our home.
Okay, so it's not like there's going to be 10 big trucks sitting
Never.
there.
And so additionally, we don't have people coming and going. Our subcontractors go to the job. They don't come by our office to pick stuff up. We, in fact, deliver all of our supplies, all of our equipment, pumps, filters, things like that, to our plumber. He puts them together, and then he shows up on the job with them. So, we don't have big deliveries. We have absolutely zero intention of becoming a retail store. We don't have the space, nor do we want to. We don't want chemicals in our building, and that's not the kind of environment that we want to project. We want to make sure that when a homeowner comes to our property, that it looks really nice as his backyard should look, so that gives them the confidence that they've made the right choice.
Well, I understand that. As far as the parking spots at the top, right? So those would be more for
For us, when we came for the day,
Okay.
and we come and go a lot. We'll come in for a couple hours, we'll do some stuff, then we got to go check on our jobs. So yeah, we want to pull up there, walk in, come out, but our trucks would be down below with our trailers and our equipment. We have no intention of putting those up there.
The only other question I had was, when I went by the property, I noticed that there was a lot of cars parked on the side of the road next to where the daycare was. And, you know, obviously there's a concern for safety with all the kids. So you're not concerned with coming out of there with the cars parked on the side with some of that machinery on the back there?
No,
Because it
no,
was
and-
tight with the median. There's a median there, one way, cars parked on the side. You think you can
Oh, yeah.
maneuver that?
You know, we maneuver these vehicles in driveways and in backyards all the time, so we won't have any issue there.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Any other questions? There are none at this time. I don't see anyone. You'd like to say something?
These were me.
You did a good job. All right. There is no point opening and closing public comments. Is there anything else you need to say? You're done.
Sure.
All right. Thank you.
I appreciate it.
I'll turn this over to the board for discussion and/or a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I actually had a question of Michael. Do you know I know I can kind of piece the history of the abutting property together. When did that become the city of Milton? And the reason I'm wondering is there is a chicken and egg kind of a event here that, you know, there was the 50-foot buffer, you know, they didn't do the 50-foot buffer. You know, what was the sign of the kind of the general history of that?
So I did look up the adjacent properties, and if I remember correctly, I think the first or the residential home that was closest to this development, let me see if I've got that. I believe it was developed according to the tax record in 2009. And I know that the city of Milton just a few years ago, not just a few years ago, but probably right before that time, went from a traditional zoning code to a form-based zoning code. For instance, I can't tell you for sure the zoning of these individual lots here to the south, but this property right here has, I believe, T4 zoning, which is a mixed-use zoning in city of Milton. This is Milton. This is Milton, and all of these residential homes are Milton. This is just a pocket right here that's south of North Main Street. It's kind of a strange little pocket that comes just south of North Main Street that's in Milton, likely picked up by Milton during the annexations that were occurring in the 90s and 2000s, early 2000s. But there was, you know, I did speak to City of Milton, and they did acknowledge that, you know, when the property owner, the current property owner had this, that this did not have residential zoning or residential use. So I was able to confirm that with Milton.
What is the size of that property?
Of this property?
The adjacent, yes.
It's just a little bit smaller. I don't know exactly offhand. I did pull the information on it. See if I can find it here real quick. I believe it was close to about a half acre.
Yeah, it looks somewhat like half an acre, maybe a little less.
Thought I had it right here. No, that's the applicant's. Yes, it's just under a half acre.
And it's
0.49.
And it's a mixed use.
Yeah, T4 zoning, it allows for a mix of uses. You could do commercial or residential.
Yeah, it's very small for mixed use.
Yes.
Michael, just on that topic, can you repeat why that property to the west, it's zone mixed use, but I know in your report you said it's more likely to be developed as commercial because of...
Just given its frontage on North Main Street, you know, it's very unlikely, and just the way that this was developed. So the home builder that built these homes had this property, and they pad graded the property, they installed this buffer, and then they sold it off in about 2009 when they were finished with this development. So those things kind of tell me that it's likely they never intended to develop it for residential. And given its location on Main Street, it's likely that it would eventually develop for commercial use. But our code makes us look at this as what could potentially. It's whether it's zoned or how it's used. And the zoning would potentially allow for residential use, which is why we advertise it as a variance.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
All right. It's up to the board.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion that I move that we approve CU-21-16/V-21-34 Custom Pools of Atlanta, 711 North Main Street, subject to the conditions as read by Mr. Woodman.
I second.
Motion has been made and properly seconded. Any further discussions? I will mention that, when I read the application, the concern I raised regarding the variance gave me pause, and that's why when we come here and we listen to each other, we listen to staff and the applicant, we should be open to be persuaded otherwise, and based on the information I've obtained, I'm going to support that motion. But, we are very always concerned about potentially setting a precedent for any type of variance, because we've seen this happen time and time again, where people come and point at a condition or a variance we made or deviation from the code, and it's used to justify similar departure from the code. But with respect to, because of the size of the property, the sequence of events that occurred previously that the property owner had no control over, I have been persuaded to support the motion. Just want to put that on the record. And again, the point is always to make sure that there are unique circumstances that would make it much more difficult for the owner to develop or become undevelopable, if I may use that term. And we want to accommodate the rights of the property owner at the same time, but not make it where it becomes the norm, where everybody wants to do the same thing. So it creates a challenging circumstance for a property owner to do something. Then we should be reasonable in granting such variances. I think I've talked enough.
No, I agree with you, Chairman.
I fully concur with you. I know we've made a motion, but this is an unusual circumstance, and you're right that if it comes to pass that we're up here together and a variance comes up and somebody says, well, you granted this variance because this was a super unusual circumstance. As I said, I'm not sure which came first, the chicken or the egg on this. So as I've made a motion, and we'll go from there.
Excellent. That's why we have to put these things on record, so staff in the future can, if they are challenged in that regard, they are able to explain why there are two different circumstances, because the code is the code. It says one thing. Why should we make exceptions? And in order for us to make those exceptions, we have to be able to justify them. So it doesn't expose the city, because that can potentially happen if it's denied in the future. So I just want to make sure that we are able to put that on the record so it can be explained if it ever happens in the future. If there are no further discussions or in favor, please raise your right hand. The motion carries unanimously. That was funny. It made us laugh. It goes to City Council on February the 21st, 2022, and the council makes the final decision. The recommendation from the board is for approval. Any other item the board would like to discuss before I adjourn the meeting? Hearing none, the meeting is adjourned, and we'll see you in March.